Welcome back to Achieving Unlimited Health. In our last episode, Dr. Cima introduced us to the triune of health, the chemical, physical, and mental emotional pillars that really guide his entire philosophy. So today we're focusing on the first pillar, which is the chemical side. So from nutrition to biochemistry, this is where so much of our health begins. So we're going to hear more from Dr. Cima about his personal connection to nutrition and why food, labs, and chemistry are often the key to unlocking lifelong vitality. So let's dive in. So glad to see you today and connect, learn a little bit more. Awesome. So last episode was great. We learned a lot. You introduced us to your philosophy, but today we're going to focus more so just on the main first pillar, which is, like I said, the chemical side. So before we dive fully into the science, what did a typical meal look like for you growing up in your household?
Well, we were Italians, so my mother always cooked. Every night of the week was a kind of a different, uh, let's say, meal, but it was the same thing every 7 days. So we had meat, chicken, fish, pasta. We had a lot of different things. In the morning, she would always make us breakfast, whether it be eggs or even way back when, she would make me protein shakes. And we had the typical sandwiches for lunch. But most of the time, we never went out to dinner. We always ate, always. It was like, I think maybe twice a year you go out for dinner if it was, someone's graduation or something like that. But my mom was always like cooking, 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 and that's what she wanted to do. And so it was great. So we always grew up with a lot of good, wholesome foods. As much as sometimes I didn't necessarily want to eat it, I'd rather have candy and cookies and cake. But we had a good staple diet.
Of
So
course, yeah, nothing beats home cooking.
yeah,
That's for sure. And I know nutrition is something that's always been important to you, and you've always emphasized nutrition pure and simple, even kind of going back to what your mom made it sounds like. So, where did that phrase or philosophy come from? Was it
uh,
from home cooked meals or?
no, actually, it was from me. I When I started to get involved with nutrition, I started to really go into the really in depth into the minutia of nutrition, especially nutrition, endocrinology, and laboratory diagnosis, which kind of you had to be well professed in those areas to really understand nutrition properly. And as I went through all that minutia, and I wrote a book, was basically on blood chemistry analysis. Actually, there's like 3 or 4 sections. There's like well over 800 pages of information on nutrition, mostly for the doctor. Okay, and it taught about, how to look at blood tests and determine which blood tests would determine what gland organs malfunctioning. So as I went through all this minutia, I finally realized, I said, you know what? Nutrition, if you just look at it simply, it's a lot easier. It's not confusing. And so I figured, let me just write something called Nutrition Pure and Simple. Because most people that deal with nutrition, you'll see all these gurus out there, they make it complicated. And it's not complicated, it's very, very simple. And if you just follow some basic rules and regulations, you'll be fine. Except that today's world, everybody's an expert, everybody's a guru. So you listen to one guy, he says one thing, you listen to somebody else, they say something else. And all I can tell you, for the last 50 years, I've been saying the same thing. I haven't changed. So so whatever I was saying back 50 years ago, I'm still saying today. And like I said, if you really look at nutrition, it is really simple. You don't have to complicate it. You can make it really, really easy and put together nutritious meals and improve your overall health as time goes on.
Absolutely. It sounds like it's also been super consistent for over 50 years, and you're sticking to those rules that you made,
Thanks.
and
Yep.
it's
Thank
obviously
you.
beneficial.
Yep.
And was there a moment, I guess, in your own life where you realized that food was actually more powerful in a way than medicine?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. It was always like, if you're having a problem with health and wellness, instead of going for medications, regardless of what the medication would be about, you'd say, what can we do nutritionally to help improve it? Now, I know certain people would say, we're born diabetic. So you still have to deal with the diabetes, and you still have to make sure that the nutrition that you're giving a diabetic type 1 patient is going to be good for them. So you don't have to really stress out the pancreas, which is already stressed out, or the adrenals. And if you just follow a good diet and really just watch those things, you can at least help improve your diabetes, and maybe at certain times reverse it to a degree. And so I saw that with all different kinds of health issues, once I started studying nutrition in my practice, because some patients would come in with a gallbladder problem, or some people would come in with GERD or some kind of acid reflux, or they have a problem with their colon, they had colitis, or they had, many other different problems, whether it be their adrenals or their gallbladder or their spleen or whatever. So you'd have to be able to figure out, how can I make this right? I mean, medication may be necessary, but what you still have to do is you still have to fuel the body. You still have to understand that the body requires food for three purposes. One is for energy. Two is to repair and rebuild all the cells in your body, and you have 100 trillion. And also three is to produce all the chemicals necessary for your survival, which could be enzymes, hormones, antibodies, or whatever. So if you can do all that stuff with the food you're eating, you'll kind of stave off a lot of problems, health issues that you'll have 15, 20, 30 years from now, and improve your overall health of your body. Because every 6 months to a year, see, most people don't realize this, like every 6 months to a year, you have a brand new body. And people go, well, if I have a brand new body, how come I look as old as I look, or feel good? Because part of it is you're not putting the right fuels back into your body. So if you
Mhm.
start doing that, you'll be able to repair and rebuild your body in 6 months to a year. It'll be better than it is now. And 6 months to a year after, it'll even be better than it is, 6 months to a year after that. So therefore, it was like, okay, if you can keep on doing this and keep on reversing the cycle, you can maintain a good, healthy lifestyle and look good for your age. It's not, I always tell patients, I said, look, if you're 60 or 70, you're not going to look like you're 30 or 40 anymore, but you want to look like a really healthy 60 or 70-year-old person. So if people come up to you and go, how old are you? And you tell them your age, and they go, wow, you don't look like you're more than 65. That's what you want. And you just want to be able to eat. And with the nutrition, it makes your whole emotional state so much better,
Mhm.
especially because in today's world, when you look at a big problem today with nutrition, is obesity. I think we spoke about this a little bit.
Mhm.
We're more obese now than we ever were
Yeah.
in all the years that I've been on this planet, and it's getting worse. And a lot of it has to do with just the way people are eating, and they're not sure what they should and shouldn't be doing, and
Mhm.
so start eating, and they think that, well, sometimes it could be just a caloric situation where you're taking in too many calories, but then there are people who starve themselves and they still gain weight because they have some kind of a glandular imbalance, or something
Mhm.
they're not handling. And therefore, as time goes on, things just get worse and worse and worse. And as you start gaining that weight, then you start really emotionally flipping out. Because the big thing about, like, let's say, obesity is, I mean, obviously you don't feel good. That's without a doubt. But
Mhm.
do is when you look in the mirror, you don't like what you look like. Your self-image and your self-esteem are down in the trash. And so it has many ramifications of how it can really impact your life, from the way you dress. So I gotta hide my, physique because I just don't like the way it looks, and I can't lose the weight. But you can, everybody can. It's just, it takes time. It takes the right nutritional profile. But if you do it with the right exercises, you'll be fine. So I always tell patients, I said, look, I never had a health problem when I was younger. It was like I was always the skinny kid. So I got into my 30s and I was practicing. I was like maybe 165, 170. And then when I got into bodybuilding, what happened was I went from, you know, let's say 165, and in 5 years went to 240, 250. So that was just like, it was a tremendous amount of weight training and tremendous amount of eating. I mean, I'd be eating 7,000 calories a day.
Wow.
I'd
That's
have 3,000 calories for dinner. And after a while, it was like, it was like eating was kind of like getting aggravating because I have to keep on eating and eating and eating. You almost force yourself to eat. I mean, steak, pasta. I mean, those things that people go, I can't eat those things. If I do, I gain weight. But with
mhm.
me, I was gaining weight, but it was more muscle mass and things like that. So,
Absolutely. And like you said, there are so many different pieces of information out there when it comes to nutrition and what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. And you've definitely mentioned the way in which you've made it simplified in a way. So I'm sure, you've also met with so many different clients over the decades, but in your decades of practicing, do you think that there's one really common mistake that people tend to make when it
Oh,
comes to
yeah.
nutrition, or a
Yeah.
misconception they have?
No, it started back in the early 80s when they vilified cholesterol. As
Mhm,
soon as you vilified cholesterol, cholesterol is a fat. So it's found with all your proteins. So by eliminating cholesterol, they wanted you to eliminate a lot of protein, whether it was eggs, whether it was red meat, okay, or whatever it was, they didn't want you to eat that. So they changed the food pyramid back in 1983, 84. I'm not exactly sure. They took meats and proteins and stuff, and they just said it's no good for you. You'll gain weight on this. And I'm looking at this because I was already doing blood chemistry analysis, and I'm saying they're going to cause problems over there. They're going to cause obesity without a doubt. And so back in the late 80s, like maybe 3, 4 years later, I wrote a book, How to Eat More, Lose Weight, and Never Diet Again, which was kind of like, people would look at that and say, nah, it's too good to be true. But it's true. And the reason why I wrote it is because I saw what was going on. I saw people were getting heavier and heavier, being on a high carbohydrate diet. And we were going to get a lot more people that are going to develop obesity, a lot more people going to become diabetic. And I just saw that. And then 35 years later, it's come true. It's like obesity's like taking off like there's no tomorrow. It's getting worse. It's not getting better.
mhm,
With obesity is even worse now, and it's getting worse every year. So with those things going on, it's going to cause a lot more heart attacks, a lot more diabetes, a lot more health issues, because anytime you're 20, 30, 40 pounds overweight, your body suffers the consequences. So, and in nutrition today, again, because of all these quote unquote experts, and they're not really experts, they tell you one thing, and they're just trying to sell you, their product, definitely their products most of the time. I got
mhm,
this product grows hair on a cue ball and all the rest of that stuff. And it doesn't make sense that there's just one product that if everybody takes it, they're going to be great, because nutrition is individual. And you
mhm,
can't say that, this supplement's good for you and it's good for somebody else, because it may be not good for somebody else, based on who it is or what it is that you're taking. And I always tell people, I say, you know, you know what the most important vitamin is? And they'll go, oh, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin A. No, the one you're lacking. That's
mhm.
the most important. And the same thing with minerals. It's like, what's the most important mineral? It could be calcium, it could be magnesium, it could be phosphorus, it could be potassium. But, it's based on each particular person's individual, lifestyle and
Yeah.
nutritional, information that they're feeding themselves and that they're working with. So if you basically, follow nutrition, it's really simple. But
Mhm,
people complicate it. They love to complicate it. In fact, if I had to learn nutrition today, Layla, I would be like dumbfounded. It's like, what do I do? How do I go about this? This back when I
absolutely.
this, it was like kind of simple. I said, okay, I want nutrition in my practice. What do I need to know? And I said, well, I knew at that time everybody had a unique, let's say, biochemical background. So each person's diet would have to be a little bit different. They can't be all the same, because we all come from all different, areas of the world. And then the next thing was like, okay, how do you deal with a diabetic? How do you deal with someone that has their gallbladder removed or part of their intestines removed? So you have to be able to understand that too as well, so that this way you can provide the proper nutritional support, whether it's supplements or vitamins, minerals, homeopathic remedies, herbs, glandulas, whatever it's going to be, and put together a nice profile of products. So it basically with the diet can kind of help balance your body chemistry. And the good thing, what I did was when I learned this, it was I was like saying, okay, how do I determine what kind of foods are right for each person? And as soon as I ask that question, and I always tell people this all the time, and this is something, if you ask the right question, your mind will come up with the right answer. Seriously, if you tell yourself, even in passing, it's like, I'm so stupid. Guess what the body's going to do, or the mind? The mind's going to come up with all the reasons why you're an idiot. Okay. But if you ask if you ask the body the right questions, like how will they determine what kind of a nutritional profile each person should use, you'll get an answer. And I got this answer. It was in a blood chemistry analysis.
Mhm.
Doctor utilizing this procedure, and his name is Dr. Kelly, to determine like what kind of foods would be right for you. When I listened and I understood his work, it was like, wow, this is pretty great. This is really nice. And he did it through blood chemistry analysis. And then I said, okay, I also need to know like how the body's functioning from a glandular organ perspective. And all of a sudden, get this guy, Dr. Brockman, he's using blood chemistry analysis to determine glandular and organ columns. So I took both their works and compiled them together to come up with a really good plan for each particular patient. And so this way it was like, as long as they followed this, they would start improving. And that was my goal. It was like, I knew nutrition was really important, and people were confused, and they weren't sure what they should and shouldn't do. And this was a surefire way to kind of get them right on track. And once they got on track, it was a lot easier because they'd be able to help improve their overall health. So
Absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting how you combined those two things to really come up with that dynamic. And I know something you've also said, I think in a prior episode, is you are a product of what you eat. So
right.
when you say that, what do you really wish that every listener understood about that statement specifically?
Yeah, well, that was my father. He told me, no, he goes, James, he goes, you're a product of what you eat. You eat junk, you're going to be like a junkyard. He goes, you eat good, wholesome foods, you're going to be healthy. So that always stuck in the back of my mind. And it was like, even when I was like, a teenager, and you're out there, you're eating crap too, as I'm 15, 16, I'm eating home, but I'm still going out into the candy store and doing this and doing that. But every time I had something that wasn't so good, that crept back into my mind, like, you can't eat this way. Yeah, you can have fun and maybe at a birthday or whatever on a weekend, you want to go out and eat things and do things that you normally don't do. As long as you stay consistent with a good, healthy diet, you'll be fine. So it was like, that's what you have to do. And most people, they'll look for the simple ways out as far as like cooking and all the rest. And rather than eating wholesome foods, they eat junk. Or they have stuff that, it tastes great. I know my wife will go to Costco. I don't know if you have Costco's up there. I'm
Yeah.
sure you. And you go around and you walk around Costco and they got all these people giving you the samples of this and samples of that.
Mhm.
It tastes great. Don't get me wrong. But if you look at if you can't read, the ingredients, then it's all chemicals. And so the better that food usually tastes, the more chemicals are in there. So that's what you want to stay away from. That's the biggest thing. And RFK is doing that right now. He's trying to get a lot of crap out of the foods, and hopefully he'll be able to, you know, do a lot of the things that he wants to do to make the food more wholesome. When you go to Europe, half the foods that we have here, you can't get them there. So because they know it's poison. So it's like, we're the greatest nation in the world. Why should we eat poisonous foods? And then you have other people, I don't want to mention any names, that want to make in the laboratory, which is like, come on, please. We can grow our own foods. We don't need laboratory made foods,
Mhm.
especially with God knows what you're putting in there. So, but that's what you want to do. You want to try to get rid of a lot of crap from your foods and just eat natural foods. And the more you do that and just cook, I always tell people as a cook spot, you just don't mix 10,000 different things in there. If you can have a piece of meat, a piece of steak, just grill a steak or fry it. It doesn't matter. Just have it. And then if you want to put seasoning on there, that's fine. But putting all kinds of salsa and stuff like that on top of it, half the time then you don't even know what you're eating. And that's
Yeah.
the reasons why I don't even like to go out to eat anymore. Besides the fact that it's like super expensive. Okay. No, it's amazing. I can't. I'm just watching it for decades. It's like you go out to dinner, two people, my wife and I, you're looking at $250, $300 for just a basic dinner, nothing like elaborate. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like I'd rather stay home for $250. I can buy about 10 fillets from Costco, and I can
There you go.
now. So it's so much better to eat home because you know what's in the meal, you're preparing it. I know it's a little bit of a pain, but you know what? It's your health that you have to really look at, and that's the
Mhm. And I
so
feel like the more you do that, you kind of build that routine as well, and it kind of will become almost like a second nature versus something that can be hard or cumbersome. Once you're used to it, it becomes easier. It's a part of the daily routine.
And you know what? I always have people pick foods that they really like because they're not going to eat. If I tell them to eat mung beans because I think it's good for them, they're not eating them. You know, it's like if I say eat a steak, oh yeah, definitely without a doubt. So I always give them the foods I think they'll do well with. Like, we do something called metabolic typing, which is, you've heard of paleo, ketogenic, Mediterranean, vegan and stuff. So they have all these different diets out there, but you don't know who you are or what you are. The purpose of the blood chemistry analysis is to tell you what type you are. So you're not guessing. So if you come out as a paleo, it'll give you a diet for paleo. If it comes out paleogenic, you can mix both together. But then you got a list of foods that you can pick from that you like. And as long as you start doing that, then, obviously the other portion is when you start picking the foods. Food combining is really important, like eating acid and foods together. So digestion is a lot easier on your stomach, your intestines, because so many people have problems with digestion today. It's sad. And looking for all different ways to, get over this, the GERD, whatever it is, or the acid reflux, and they're miserable. They're miserable. And so by eating the right combinations of food, you can help eliminate a lot of this stuff. And there are also, things you can do digestion-wise with supplementation that'll help you digest better. And then there are also things that I utilize in my practice. They're called visceral visceral techniques that work with the organs and glands. Because a lot of times people think that an organ and glandular problem is just chemical. It's not. Sometimes it's physical. So as long as you can determine, like, where the physical problem is, you can probably help improve gallbladder problems, stomach, and all the rest. And so that's what as far as like making nutrition pure and simple, that's the way you do it. Just pick food you really like, combine them the way you would really like, and then just make sure you're not, being a pig and eating everything in sight. It's only small amounts. And here's something that, kind of, there was a patient of mine, and I'm going back to the early 80s. And she said to me one day, she goes, Dr. Cima, she says, when you chew your food, she says, how many chews do you do before you swallow the food? And back then I was like, I said, you know what? I don't even chew my food. I just like chew it, like 2 bites, drink water, and swallow it. And she, no, 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 you can't do that. So I said, what do you mean? She says, when you've taken food, you should chew it for at least 30 or 40 times before you swallow it. Get the mastication really good, get the saliva mixed in with the food, chopped up really small. So when it gets to your stomach, it's already pre-digested. And so I was like, I start to like eat slower because when you start chewing your food, you eat slow. But you enjoy the food more. You taste things that you normally wouldn't taste if you just swallow the food, almost whole. And I see that a lot with a lot of Americans because they're always on the run. They
Yeah.
just go and go, and so they'll just eat, and that's in itself is not good because you're going to wind up not digesting the food properly, and you're going to start to develop problems with digestion. So
Mhm. And I've heard that in similar, not exactly the same, but chewing your food, eating slower, you won't overeat. It helps with overeating, and you'll feel full.
well,
And
fast.
mhm.
Yeah, your satiety is really improved because the slower you eat, by the time it gets to the stomach's already signaling the brain, okay, I'm full.
Yeah,
So you don't have to eat as much. And that's
exactly.
a good thing. And like I said, you enjoy the foods more.
For
I
sure.
love when I chew. And sometimes, like, the worst thing to do is watch or eat food when you're watching TV. Because
Mhm.
depending,
Mine.
especially, yeah, especially if you're watching the news, you want to kill somebody. So the whole it's like you're better off. It's like, chew your food. Maybe if you want to watch TV, watch something that's not going to aggravate the crap out of you, and just be happy as far as that goes. But the more you chew your food, you're going to get much more out of that food.
For
All
sure.
right. Yeah, and as far as being able to digest it properly, and a lot of the food that you take will definitely be absorbed in the small intestines. Whereas if you ate too quick, it's just going to go right through the intestines and right out of your body. So,
Yeah. And that even I think correlates with exactly what you were saying about, in America we're moving fast and eating on the go, and not really digesting properly. And similarly with the issue with obesity, how that
Yeah.
clearly ties in with each other. And there are so many, like you said earlier, an overwhelming amount of information when it comes to nutrition and diets and things like that. I mean, especially in the media, you're hearing about things like that all the time. But what do you think are some of the myths or fads about nutrition specifically that really frustrate you the most and really are harmful for people in the long run?
The biggest fads out there right now is the the cholesterol.
Hmm.
It's, I shouldn't call it a fad now because it's been around for 40 years, but it's by eliminating your cholesterol in your diet. And here's the sad part is that your body produces it. Your liver produces 80% of the cholesterol. So even if you take cholesterol in, the body won't even absorb it. It'll just like flush it right out.
Yeah.
So if your liver's working properly and you're eating, I'm not saying you're going crazy with cholesterol, but you're eating a good amount and you're getting the protein because cholesterol is always found with protein. And so you get a good amount of protein in, you're going to start feeling better. And cholesterol itself is like, they say the LDLs are the bad cholesterol. And if you really look at it, the LDLs make your sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So if you have a hormonal imbalance, it could be caused from the fact that you're not taking enough cholesterol. The cholesterol LDLs, which is supposed to be the bad, again, they produce your phospholipids, which basically surround your brain and prevent it from short circuiting, like with dementia or premature senility, which is like an orbit today. It's really super high because they cut back on the cholesterol, then they give you statins to make it even worse. So all of a sudden you start absorbing a lot of the phospholipids in the brain and it starts to short circuit. So you're at 65 years old, you're walking around in your underwear and you think you're ready to go to work. So that's what happens. But it has a lot to do with so many other different things. And people are so afraid of the cholesterol. Every time we'll do a blood chemistry, they'll go, "Oh, how's my cholesterol?" I say, "Your cholesterol's fine. The rest of the test sucks." Okay. But that's what they're interested in. And they say, "Why in the cholesterol?" Well, doctor told me that, I'm going to have a heart attack. And I said, I have patients that cholesterol 250, 275, and all their arteries are cleared and they're clearing and they're in their 60s and they have no problems. And the doctor's still want to put them on statins. And the statins will cause problems with your liver and cause problems with, muscle metabolism and cause a lot of aches and pains in your muscles. And it's really unnecessary to take. And then they tell you, like, okay, to stay away from cholesterol, you're staying away from protein instantaneously. So that the most abundant thing that makes up your body besides water is protein. So if I had to look at three types of food, you have proteins, you have fats, and you have carbohydrates. Proteins make up about 30 to 40, 45% of your body weight. Fats make up, or should make up about 15 to 20%. With most people, it's more like 30 to 40%. So they have a lot of like fat on their bodies. And carbohydrates, maybe 2 to 3% of your body is made of carbohydrates. And then if you look at proteins can be made into fats and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates and fats can't be made into protein. So if I had to pick up food to eat all the time, it would be protein. So even if I take in more protein, the body will convert that to fat or convert it to carbohydrate. And in this way, at least, I won't be starving myself from protein, which is a major building block of all my muscles, my bones, my organs, and my whole nervous system and everything like that. So protein, real key factor. And again, most people just stay away from it because of the cholesterol scare. They did such a great job of that and advertising all that stuff that people are deathly afraid of it. And then if you look at a lot of these commercials as far as weight loss goes, now they're using like insulin type drugs to decrease weight. And it's kind of like you're going to cause all kinds of other problems. There's no doubt in my mind. And all these people that have on these commercials, it's like they're still 40, 50, 60 pounds overweight. They're not exactly like Slim Jim dancing down the street. I'm looking at these people and going, why would I want to look like her? You know what I mean? When she's like 40 pounds overweight, she's thinking she's taking this drug that's supposed to be helping her. I can imagine that she would be if she didn't take them, but it's replacing the drug, okay? Replacing the drug with food. That's the way it's supposed to be. And I remember my daughter Tiff, all her friends, she's in her 40s. She says, Dad, most of my friends are taking, all these medications for diabetes. I said, why? She says, well, for weight loss. I said, that's the worst thing in the world to do. You're going to create all kinds of issues here. And that's what's going to happen. But they do it because they want to be skinny. And it's, I know everybody wants to be like, look, they want to look good. But there's a way to do it. There's a way not to do it. And the way not to do it is through drugs. Because then you have to rely on the drugs all the time.
Mhm.
Well, they used to have, back in my day, they were called diet pills. Okay. They're like 10,000 times worse. But because now they're playing with your hormones and everything. So
Mm.
it's it's at a point right now where medications can't do any of this, all the things you need to do as far as nutrition is concerned. Sometimes you need them. And sometimes a necessary evil, but the majority of people don't need medication. And the goal would be, if you do have to take medication, then at least take the least amount possible, so that this way you'll have the least amount of, they call them side effects. Okay. They're diseases, because once you develop symptoms from medication, that's a disease process. That's not a side effect. So when the disease can basically kill you, well, why would I even take it? Or cause me? I like these ones where it's they're antidepressants, but they give you suicidal thoughts. It's like, why, if I'm depressed, would I want to have suicidal thoughts? Because all you got to do is have a bad day, have some suicidal thoughts, pull a gun out of your closet and blow your brains out. And that sometimes happens.
Yeah,
So depressed with their lives. But the goal would be to, like, I mean, obviously with the proper nutrition, you're going to be more stable. Because one of the things too that people don't realize is that your brain, I think, utilizes somewhere between 50 to 60% of your oxygen, and
mhm,
50% of the glucose that gets into your blood is used by the brain. So if your blood sugar is too low or whatever, your brain starts to falter right away. And once it starts faltering, you can't think straight, you get confused, you think you're losing your mind, and you're not. It's just that the brain isn't being fueled properly to function. So it gets to a point where you want to have good brain function, and the way you'll do it is with proper nutrition. So
absolutely. I know even when I'm hungry, I get like brain fog and all sorts of things, and it's a direct,
yeah.
correlation. But
Oh, my wife will tell you the same thing. She'll go, I know you're hungry. I can tell by you.
hungry, you get the crankiness, the mood changes.
Yeah, and so I can see that it just. I mean, here's my wife. She knows me better than anybody else, and she'll tell me. She'll say, "I know you're hungry. I can tell by the way you're acting." So you don't know it. You don't realize it, because your brain is like, you're thinking, you're going crazy all day long, studying this, studying that, doing this, doing that, and then you get, like you said, the brain fog at certain times, and it's like, what's going on? And it's because you're not fueling your body properly. If you do that, it'll just keep on getting better and better. So
Absolutely. And speaking about all of this and diets and the overwhelming conflicting information that is out there, right? So I know that many people feel that way and can agree and feel overwhelmed by different diets and superfoods and all this conflicting advice. And you've really found a way to simplify it, which you've expressed today. But how do you simplify it to your patients in a way that they feel empowered and not confused by it?
well, what we do is, like, we'll usually do, if they come in and they're interested in nutrition, we'll usually do a blood test on them. And then when they come back, we have all the information of what showed up on the blood test, and kind of explain it to them and say, look, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working with your nutritional profile, like what food you should eat. And then we'll focus on that. And then once we can get that, and then we also have, you know, uh, let's say, apps that kind of show you how many carbohydrates you take it in, how much protein, how much fat, and I can, like, look at what's going on too as well. But we just educate the patients. I have a whole bunch of videos for them. Now we'll be having some podcasts too that kind of explain all this. So the more that they learn, and I have books. I have How to Eat More, Lose Weight, Never Diet Again, and we have blogs, and we have YouTube videos, and so it kind of explains my whole process about, like, when you're going to eat, this is the way you want to eat, and this is what you want to look at. And a lot of times people, like, they'll go in for, again, people have problems with their weight. That's the way
Mhm.
biggest problems out there. So their biggest concern is, how am I going to lose the weight? How am I going to lose the weight? And so it's a process in losing the weight, because when you're losing the weight, you just want to lose fat and water. You don't want to lose muscle mass. And there's a way to eat, there's a way to exercise for you to do that. So you start to lose some weight, but you're just taking excess water and excess fat off the body. But you're keeping the muscle, which is basically necessary for your survival. So if you can start like educating them that way, so that this way, as long as you have this app and you know what you're taking in, you'll be surprised how many calories you can really take in. And a lot of people, when they want to restrict their calories, which is the worst thing in the world. And that's what people do. That's another big bone of contention I have with the weight loss industry. They think that the less you eat, the better off you're going to be. And I said, that doesn't make sense. I said, if I get into my car and I want to go faster, I give it more gas, not less. Okay. So you mean to tell me if I eat less food, I'm going to stimulate my metabolism? No, it's not going to work that way. It's the same thing with a fireplace. You want a fire to burn brightly, you throw in big logs. You don't want it you don't want it to burn brightly, just stop feeding it and it'll just die out. So by eating the right foods, you stimulate metabolism. So it's not like a calorie counter thing. Because there are days I'll get up and I check pretty much every day. I look at like how much protein I took in, fats, carbohydrates, and calories. And there are days I'll take in 4,000 calories and I'll lose 2 pounds. Then there are days I take in 2,200 calories and I'll gain a pound or two. So it's not the amount of calories, it's the types of foods that you're taking in, you're retaining fluid or whatever it is. But as time goes on, you start to see like, okay, when I eat this way, I feel good. I have a lot of energy. When I go to the gym to work out, I feel strong. I feel like I can, I have a good stamina. I can stay there for a good 45 minutes to an hour and feel like, okay, I did a good job. And so as long as you're eating properly, that's what's going to happen. So
Absolutely. And that will, help to change someone's mood and
without a
their
doubt.
mobility and their overall everyday life too. And I know, looking back now, how has your view of nutrition evolved over the last 50 years? Have there been moments in which patients really proved the science to you in ways that may have surprised you at all?
Not really. I mean, because you're doing it for 50 years. After a while, it's like everybody with the same problem. You explain it to them, but that was the best part. It was like learning this stuff and realizing that going on restricted caloric intakes and eating food that you don't like to eat are not the way to lose weight or not the way to live, because you can't live that way. It's like with when I'm eating, I can live the way I'm eating because I've been doing it for decades and I enjoy what I'm eating. Like tonight, I'll go home and I'll have probably a filet. I'll probably have some vegetables and maybe a glass or two of wine, and that'll be it. And keep desserts down to a minimum. If I do have a dessert, usually it's like a protein shake now or something like that. But and I don't. It's not that I don't like cookies and cakes and all the rest, but I've got to a point where I can live it. I can keep it away from me, or I can eat it, and it doesn't bother me. And I don't have to eat it like every night, every night, every night. So I just try to keep everything in a nice balance. And I love what I'm eating. I just enjoy like every night. It's like, okay, what am I going to eat tonight? Is it going to be a burger? Is it going to be steak? Is it going to be fish? Is it going to be chicken? How we're going to prepare it? What kind of vegetables? Mushrooms and onions or rice or whatever it's going to be. It's like I put together the meal and it's like, I can't wait to eat it, as opposed to, eating something that you don't necessarily want to eat. It's not going to, excite me to do that. So
Mhm. Absolutely. Sticking to what you like and what you know. And, I think there's part of that where people may not know sometimes what they like and just having to
some of them
try
don't.
it.
Yeah, most of them don't. And when I put them, well, here's the thing that I get from the patients all the time. When I change their nutritional profile to what it's supposed to be, they're
Mhm.
happy as they're really happy. They enjoy it. They like what they're eating, and if they're true with with the exercise as well as the proper nutritional profile, then they're
Mhm.
going to lose some weight too, and they're going to feel much better. So it's something that you want to do that, because as you go through the aging process, you want to keep on improving, how you feel and how you look, so that this Yeah, this way, when you're 60 or 70, you don't feel like, okay, I'm at the end of my life and I can't do anything and I can't eat anything and all the rest of that stuff that people go through.
Absolutely. And for example, if, someone is listening right now and they can only change, let's say, one thing about their nutrition starting even today, what's
Right.
the most powerful first step that you think they should take?
Protein, eat protein. Yeah.
Protein, protein, protein.
Yeah, what you want to do is again, depending on your weight and stuff like that, you want to eat a good amount of protein. And like I said, if you eat too much protein, it'll convert it into carbohydrates and fats. So as long as you're eating the protein, you're getting all the building blocks for your body to repair and rebuild itself and produce all the chemicals necessary for your survival, as long as you're eating the right things. But the biggest thing is, like I see with most patients, protein, because they've done such a great job of brainwashing people over the decades about cholesterol and about wheat's no good, it increases your cholesterol. Eggs are no good because it increases your cholesterol, even though it has nutrients in there that helps emulsify and break the cholesterol down in the eggs. They still say that don't eat eggs, but you can eat chicken. It's like, where'd the chicken come from? It's like they never make sense. It's always like a whole confusion thing that they kind of throw at you. And so when you don't make sense, then you start doubting yourself because you can't doubt the experts because they supposedly know everything and they don't. And like I said, a lot of either trying to sell their diet or they're trying to sell some kind of supplement. And the supplement itself is not going to do what they think it's going to do because everybody's unique and different. And if maybe one person out of 10 will feel a little bit better on that supplement, they'll feel fine with that. But the reality is, it's not just a supplement. It's looking at your overall nutritional profile, how you feel, what kind of things you're going through as far as your health is concerned. If you're like, for example, you're talking about brain fog before, sometimes by 4 or 5 o'clock or four, maybe even before that, people are starting to get it. And the last 2, 3 hours of work, they're like semi-conscious. They can't even think straight. And then they go home and they get really upset because I'm losing my. Sometimes they think they're losing their mind, which is yeah, and it's not something that I don't hear that all the time. It's that I hear
Mhm.
it because again, people are not taking in nowhere near enough protein. So I tell my patients, I say, look, based on your weight, based on your body composition, how much fat you have on it, we tell you like this is the amount of protein we need for you to take in every day. If you can take that protein in, then you'll start to see a difference in your energy levels. You'll start to see a difference in your brain fog. You'll start to see a difference in, your stamina and all the rest. And then you'll kind of like you'll feel like you're young again. That's probably the best put it. You don't feel like I'm overwhelmed and I have to, deal with this stuff. And what are you gonna do? It's like, if you're having brain fog or you're having like fatigue, there's just so much coffee you can drink, and after a while, it's not. It's then the coffee will start causing problems with your digestion and all the rest of that stuff. So you want to just like look at everything and say, okay, fine. What's my protein? Then that's what I always say to myself. No matter what the meal is, I always ask myself, what's my protein going to be? And
Right.
so I love protein. I just love it. And another thing I would recommend for people, especially if they didn't take a blood test or anything, what you want to do is there's two other ways to find out like how you should eat. One is like what's your nationality.
Mhm.
And so now being in Florida, some people don't know what they're I had a girl come in today, sweet young girl, and she was. I said, "What's your nationality?" She was American. I said, "No." I said, what country did your ancestors come from? Because Irish and German and stuff. I said, know what do they eat? She says, well, they eat this, they eat meat, and they eat. That's the way you gotta eat. That's your biochemically, genetically. That's what that's what allowed you to become that person that eats these kinds of foods. And then I also say to them, I say, well, if I was going to take you out for dinner, what restaurant would you want to go to and what would you order? And they'll say, well, I'd like to go and have whatever. It could be fish, it could be vegetables or whatever it is. And see, that's what you really like. That's what I really like. Well, that's what you should be eating. Start to look at like, just intuitively and just realize like, okay, there are certain foods and I know I should eat intuitively. I know what really works well. And some people go, well, I don't, they'll say I crave certain things. I'll say, well, what do you crave? And they go, well, I crave sugary things. That's another thing I see with a lot of patients.
Mhm.
What do you mean sugary things? They go, well, cake, cookies, pie, stuff like that. And I said, that's not sugar. And they go, what do you mean it's not sugar? I said, the majority of those foods, the majority of the calories come from fat. Fat tastes, so therefore, if you're like craving those things, you're craving fat. And you're not getting enough fat in because they told you don't eat it in your diet because it's going to increase your cholesterol. So you stay away from it. But when the pie comes out, you have two pieces instead of one. So if you see people, they'll go to a restaurant and they'll be concerned about this food, where they come, who grew it, what's happened, all the rest. They just grill the waiter or waitress for like hours. And then finally, like, they get the food and then they don't even eat it all. And then dessert comes as they eat everything. So
Right.
it's kind of, what are you doing? You're just all upset about the food, but then you're a whole bunch of cake and cookies and stuff like that that you really don't need to eat. So
Mhm.
you really want to eat it. It's like if you want to eat it, it's fine, but you better go out tomorrow and do a ton of exercise. So
Right.
yeah,
Finding that balance definitely sounds like it's a
I
big
mean,
part of
and it takes time,
it.
and,
Yeah.
and the key is to learn about your body, and that's why I have this app. It's called Body Sight, so I can follow them on there as well. But if they're looking at their diet, they can kind of see like, okay, over a month, how much protein did I take in every day? Was I at 30, 40%, or was I at 10 to 20%? If you're at 10 to 20%, your body's not going to do well with that
Mhm.
shortage of protein in your diet. So and you got to learn it. You got to just take your time and listen to your body, and that's what I did with the bodybuilding because they were saying, "No, you can't get big without steroids," and I was like, I was into nutrition. Had a family. I'm a doctor. And I said, I can't do steroids. I just can't do it. It's just against my
Mhm.
nature. And they said, no, you'll never be able to get big and strong. I said, watch me. And so it was all done with diet and the proper exercise. And so as long as you're doing that, and it took me a long time to learn because back during those bodybuilding days, they tell you don't eat red meat. It's
Mhm.
going to cause fat development in your body. And eat fish or eat chicken, but boiled chicken, the fish, cook it in butter, you just cook it in water or whatever. It's like I can't eat that way. It's horrible. So I would, go to the gym and I would feel like crap. And then there were days where I'd go and I have a steak the night before, go to the gym, and like all of a sudden my strength was there, my stamina was there. I start to realize like it doesn't matter what they say, my body does better with red meat. And
Right.
that's what I focused on. So I focused on red meat and all the rest of that stuff, and made sure that I was getting stronger and increasing my strength, but at the same time putting muscle on, but at the same time you're putting a certain amount of fat in there too, so that this way you were feeling like strong and healthy.
Absolutely. And like I think that's good to be so intuitive with your body and really, like you said, listen to your body and see
Yeah.
how different proteins and different foods affect you and make you feel better or make you feel not so great.
Yeah, and that's something you have to do. It's
Mhm.
doctor, it's not anybody else. And if you really want to learn about your nutrition, you got to realize like it's going to take me a few years to like figure this thing out. But as you start figuring it out, you'll start feeling better and better. And you'll get to a point where it's like I don't have to worry about dieting anymore. I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to worry about not eating that or eating this or anything else like that. It just eliminates that aggravation of like that food stuff that people get. Either they feel deprived or guilty. That's the biggest thing with most people when they don't know what they're eating. They're either deprived because they can't eat it because they think they're not supposed to, or when they do eat it, they're guilty. So mentally, emotionally, you're screwing yourself up. Besides chemical.
Right.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And I talking about all of this and even red meat, which we've said is good for you, but we've learned from previous, information that it's been advised against from some people too. So
Right.
as we do continue this series, what role will nutrition play in helping our listeners really understand this and prevent obesity, heart disease, and cancer, the three big killers?
Yeah. That's it. If you really learn your nutrition well, you'll stave off those, the heart disease, the obesity, and every other health problem that you have. It's going to help really improve everything. But it's it's really up to you to make that decision, and then it's really up to you to figure out, like, okay, what foods, like, for example, if you're a diabetic, well, you're monitoring your glucose. So if you really look at your foods that you're eating, you look at those and you look at your glucose levels, and you can get a good idea. Well, is this stressing my pancreas or it's not? If these foods aren't stressing my pancreas, then that's the ones I'll eat, because they'll help improve it. So you kind of like, work with yourself. And just because, you're feeling good now at this point, 5, 10 years from now, things will change a little bit. So you have to kind of roll with the punches and figure out, like, what I should and shouldn't do. So, but with me, like I said, for the last 40, 50 years, I've been eating a certain way, and I love the way I eat. I don't feel like deprived. I don't feel guilty. And
Mhm.
it's just like I know what I'm doing. So it's so much better than the other way, because once you start, going off on a tangent, you don't know what's happening. And you're utilizing somebody else's information to see if what's going to work for you. But if you start to know your body, and you start to know what you crave, and you understand the cravings, like I said, a lot of people, they think that they're craving carbohydrates, but they're craving fat because fat tastes sweet. So as long as you start to realize that and say, okay, what kind of like vegetables do I crave? And some
Mhm.
people, I like mushrooms and onions. I like, olives. I like, you know, whatever it could be, tomatoes. It could be anything that you want. That's what you want to make with your salads or with your vegetables. And some people like asparagus, some people like
Mhm.
broccoli. Each person a little bit unique and different. But as long as you're eating those foods and you're enjoying them and monitoring what's going on with your body, then it's going to be perfect. Because sooner or later, you're going to have to deal with this anyway. And you don't want to deal with it where a doctor's going to have to put you on medication because you have some kind of health issue. And because the medication is not going to really, it never gets to the cause of the problem. It takes the symptoms that you have and suppresses them. But by suppressing the symptoms, it causes more and more problems down the line. So the less you can take with medication, the better off you're going to be. I mean, I had a patient yesterday. She's been a patient of mine probably 40 years ago. Okay.
Wow.
She was away. She moved away about 10, 15 years ago. And she called me up about 2 months ago and said, Doc, I'm in really bad trouble. And she was telling me what's going on. And so we did a blood test on her, and they have her on like 12 or 13 different medications. It's like, uh, and I'm looking at it, and she's a diabetic, and they have her on so much insulin. Like, the levels of insulin should be between 5 and 25. She's at 60. So all the extra insulin that's in her, it's really in her bloodstream, but it's going to be forced into her organs, because that's what happens with the insulin. When it takes the blood sugar out of the blood, it stores in organs like your liver or your kidneys or your eyes. And that's what happens with diabetics. They usually have their kidneys start to fail, their liver starts to fail, they lose their sight, and all the rest of this stuff, and they get very, very, very poor circulation. So these are the things that you really want to look at. And rather than take, she goes, I wish I could get off all of them. I said, I wish I could get you off them all, but you can't quit those medications right now. You'll die. I mean, she got her on cholesterol. I mean, they get her on blood thinners, they get her on high blood pressure, and the blood pressure is like, it's like 60 or 70 over like 50. And I'm like, that's too low. She goes, yeah, sometimes I think I'm going to pass out. I said, you got to speak to your endocrinologist. You got to get to the bottom of this. And the doctors don't care. Excuse me, I shouldn't say they don't care, because I don't know all the doctors, but to try to figure out her case with 13 different medications, it's not something they're going to sit down and say, okay, it's going to take a few minutes. It's going to
Right.
take it's going to take weeks and months and stuff to figure out what's going on with you, and they just don't want to do it because it's too much money that they'll lose. And it's something that's just, it's easy to give her another medication. We'll take you off this medication, we'll give you that medication.
Mhm.
Just don't ever win with the medication. And we abuse medications. I mean, we're only, I think, 6% of the earth's population, and I think we utilize 70% of the medications on the planet. So
Wow.
yeah, so we're abusing drugs, and it's because of, it's not just the doctors. The patients are going in there looking for it too. I mean, my patients go, is there a drug I can take? Is there surgery? And I'm like looking at them and saying, do this first. Then you can think about drugs and surgery. Drugs and surgery are like the last ditch efforts. You do these things first, monitor this. And even if you have to go, like I said, with medication, still take care of yourself chemically, physically, and mentally, emotionally, and not let any doctor dictate what it is you should and shouldn't do. You have to call the shots, not the doctor. And a lot of people are afraid, and they speak to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you got to do this. You got to take cholesterol medication. And the patient goes, well, I don't want to do it. And the doctor turns around and says, well, I won't treat you, which is not really the nicest thing to do to a patient. And but that's what they do. So, but you have to make that decision, because if you make the wrong decision, it's your fault. It's
Yeah.
not the doctor's fault. He was saying like this is what he wanted to do, and you said you went along with it, and without really understanding what was going on. And like I said, the same thing with the obesity. If you don't start taking care of it, it's going to get to the point where you're just going to take medication. It's bleed. You don't have to worry about anything, but you're going to have to worry about everything because it's not going to work.
Absolutely. I could only imagine taking that many different medications is also, you don't really even understand what's helping, what's not helping. So that's even another stressor for you to even be, intuitive with your body and figure out what is working and what isn't working. And that was such a good example to, even bring awareness to, for
No,
sure.
yeah, her when I was looking at her blood work, I looked at it's called GFR. It's the filtration rate of the blood through the kidneys, and when it's really really low, they're going to start looking, for you to do some kind of kidney dialysis. She's like 5 points away. I mean, she's almost ready to be on dialysis, and I'm like, Sandy, you got to do something because you got to talk to these doctors. You got to figure out what's going on. And she's, I know, but it's like, how do you deal with this? So she had said to me, she said, well, I'll talk to him. And I said, well, talk to him and see what he'll do. And then this way she'll have some kind of a choice or an option, and maybe speak to the doctor too as well. But just let them know that you want to get off as much medication as possible. So
No, absolutely. And I think that that's so good that she was able to reach out to you and you were able to provide that insight to her. Like you said, it's been difficult probably for her to get that, you know, advice from her current providers.
oh, she called me up. She goes, Doc, she goes, like, because I treated her for like, a long time. And she goes,
Mhm.
"You're the only one I trust. I don't live near you anymore." She says, "But I want to come back and live down in Florida again." And she says, "And I just trust you." And after looking at the blood tests and stuff, I was like, Sandy, you got to do something, because she's only in the early 60s. I don't think she'll be around in another 3 or 4 years if she keeps on going this way. It's just going to get worse. She's just going to wind up. She's in and out of hospitals and stuff like that right now. So it's just going to get worse. And that's not. You don't want to be in and out of hospitals. It's not.
Absolutely.
And when you're there, you feel worse. So
For sure. Yeah. And well, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's y-
you're
uh,
welcome.
a good story to share because it is, everyone's different. For example, like we were talking about earlier, and how everyone can be dealing with different things, and having your perspective to be able to really shed some light on that for even a previous patient is definitely valuable and helpful. And thank you for sharing that and for all the knowledge you provided today and on this episode. So I think that this was definitely an inspiring look at how nutrition, pure and simple, really does shape every part of our health. And Dr. Cima, you definitely showed us today how the chemical side connects to the physical and the emotional, and
Right.
why it really is the foundation for achieving unlimited health. So, in the next episode, I think we're going to take it a step further by looking at body composition and why losing inches actually often matters more than losing pounds. So,
I love it because people go, "I want to lose weight." I said, "Wrong target. Change your body composition." What's that? So, and you got to explain to them that if you're going to like look at losing weight and not changing the body composition, all this stuff isn't going to work. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm excited to learn more about that on the next episode. And everyone listening, make sure to follow the show so you don't miss it. And until then, here's to your health without limits. Thank you so much, Dr. Sima.
thank you, Layla. Have a great night.